In the sweltering summer of 1985, a shadow fell over Southern California, a chilling presence that turned the sun-drenched paradise into a landscape of fear. This wasn't a fictional horror story. It was the real-life reign of a man who had come to be known as the Night Stalker. His name was Richard Ramirez, and his story is a dark chapter in American history, a stark reminder of the evil that can walk among us. Ricardo Leyva Munoz Ramirez was born in El Paso, Texas, in 1960. His early life was far from idyllic, marked by instability and exposure to violence. A significant and disturbing influence was his older cousin Miguel, a Green Beret veteran. Miguel would boast about his brutal wartime experiences and share graphic photos with a young Richard. This early exposure to extreme violence, coupled with a series of head injuries and a growing substance abuse problem, set Ramirez on a destructive path. By his early 20s, he had drifted to California, his life a chaotic mix of petty crime and drug use. But something far more sinister was beginning to brew beneath the surface. The series of attacks began in the summer of 1984, but it was in 1985 that the frequency and brutality escalated, creating a palpable sense of panic across Los Angeles and later San Francisco. The randomness of the victims was one of the most terrifying aspects. Men, women, and children, from different ages and backgrounds, were targeted in their own zones, the one place they should have felt safest. The perpetrator would slip through unlocked windows and doors in the dead of night, earning him the name the Night Stalker. The attacks were incredibly violent and left a trail of terror. The media frenzy was intense. Newspapers and television broadcasts were filled with composite sketches of a gaunt, wild-eyed man with unkempt hair and decaying teeth. The name Night Stalker was on everyone's lips. Residents of Los Angeles County lived in a state of high alert. Sales of firearms, locks, and window bars skyrocketed. People were afraid to sleep with their windows open, despite the suffocating summer heat. A collective sense of dread gripped the community as they wondered where and when the Night Stalker would strike next. Law enforcement was under immense pressure to catch the elusive killer. A multi-jurisdictional task force was formed, pooling resources from various police departments and the sheriff's office. The investigation was a complex puzzle. The killer left few traditional clues, but he did leave behind something distinct: a shoe print. At several crime scenes, investigators found a partial print from an Avia brand athletic shoe. This became a crucial piece of evidence, a common thread linking the seemingly random attacks. Another break came when the Night Stalker's car, a stolen orange Toyota station wagon, was identified. As the investigation progressed, a key turning point occurred. After one of his later attacks, Ramirez had attempted to carjack a vehicle but was fought off by the driver. In his haste to escape, he left behind a crucial fingerprint on the car's rearview mirror. This single print was a game-changer. Using the newly implemented Automated Fingerprint Identification System, or FIS, investigators got a match. The print belonged to Richard Ramirez, a 25-year-old with a minor criminal record in California. On August 30th, 1985, the Los Angeles Police Department took a bold step. They released Ramirez's mugshot to the public. It was plastered on the front page of every newspaper and shown on every news channel. Suddenly, the faceless monster had a name and an image. The city held its breath. The very next morning, on August 31st, Ramirez, completely unaware that his identity had been exposed, was in an East Los Angeles neighborhood. He tried to carjack a woman who recognized him from the news and screamed, "El Matador, the killer." Ramirez fled, but it was too late. An angry crowd of residents gave chase. They cornered him, subdued him, and held him until the police arrived. The reign of the Night Stalker was over, not in a dramatic shootout, but at the hands of the very community he had terrorized. The image of a beaten and captured Ramirez being led away by police was a symbol of relief for millions. The trial of Richard Ramirez was a media spectacle that began in 1988. It was one of the most expensive and lengthy trials in California history. The courtroom was a scene of bizarre and unsettling behavior. Ramirez often appeared with a pentagram drawn on his hand, and at one point he shouted, "Hail Satan!" He showed no remorse for his crimes, instead seeming to relish the attention and fear he inspired. His demeanor only further solidified his public image as a personification of evil. After a long and complex trial, in September 1989, the jury found Richard Ramirez guilty of 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, and numerous other felonies. He was sentenced to death. As he was led from the courtroom, Ramirez coldly told reporters, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland." Ramirez spent the next 2 decades on death row at San Quentin State Prison. He became a morbid celebrity, receiving mail from admirers, and even getting married in prison. His case continued to fascinate and horrify the public. He never expressed remorse and remained a chilling figure until the very end. In 2013, Richard Ramirez died from complications related to B-cell lymphoma. He was 53 years old. He was never executed by the state, but his death brought a final quiet end to a story that had terrorized a generation. The case of the Night Stalker serves as a powerful and cautionary tale. It highlights the importance of community vigilance and the crucial role of forensic science in solving complex crimes. But more than that, it's a story about the resilience of a city that refused to be paralyzed by fear. The residents of Los Angeles, who locked their doors and armed themselves, were the same people who ultimately took to the streets to capture the man who haunted their nights. They demonstrated that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, the strength of a community can shine through. Thank you for watching. The story of Richard Ramirez is a difficult one, and if you or anyone you know has been affected by violent crime, there are resources available to help. Organizations like the National Center for Victims of Crime can provide support and guidance. Please remember to take care of your mental well-being. If you found this documentary insightful, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into historical cases. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video. In the shadow of the Pacific Northwest, a story of terror unfolded, leaving a scar on the community that would last for decades. This is the story of the Green River Killer, a name that sent chills down the spine of Washington state residents throughout the 1980s and 90s. For nearly 20 years, a man moved silently among them. A predator hidden in plain sight, responsible for one of the most extensive and perplexing series of crimes in American history. His name was Gary Ridgway, a seemingly ordinary man, a truck painter by trade, married multiple times, and known by his neighbors as quiet and unremarkable. But beneath this facade of normalcy was a deeply disturbed individual. Ridgway's crimes began in the early 1980s, primarily targeting vulnerable young women, many of whom were living on the fringes of society. Their disappearances were initially treated as isolated incidents, but a horrifying pattern soon emerged. The first victims were discovered in and around the Green River in King County, Washington, which is how the unknown assailant earned his chilling moniker. As more bodies were found, a massive law enforcement effort was launched. The Green River Task Force was formed in 1982, bringing together detectives from multiple agencies, all dedicated to one single daunting goal: to catch the killer. The investigation became one of the longest and most complex in U.S. history. Investigators were faced with a frustrating lack of evidence. The killer was cunning, leaving behind very few clues. They interviewed countless individuals, chased down thousands of leads, and even had Ridgway on their radar as early as 1983. He was a person of interest, even passing a polygraph test at one point, which allowed him to slip back into the shadows and continue his horrific activities. For years, the case grew colder, and the families of the victims were left without answers, their grief compounded by the mystery. The community lived in a state of fear. The killer's elusiveness was baffling. He was a ghost, a specter haunting the region. The task force worked tirelessly, but the technology of the time limited their ability to definitively link a suspect to the scenes. Years turned into a decade, and then nearly two. The case files swelled with information, but the crucial piece of the puzzle remained missing. For the detectives who had dedicated their lives to this case, it was a heavy burden, a professional and personal mission that seemed just out of reach. Then, in the late 1990s, a breakthrough came not from a new witness or a confession, but from a revolution in forensic science: DNA technology. Evidence that had been meticulously collected and preserved decades earlier now held the key. In 2001, investigators were finally able to re-examine old evidence using these new techniques. They found a match. The DNA linked Gary Ridgway, the quiet truck painter who had been a suspect all along, to several of the victims. In November 2001, nearly 20 years after the first bodies were found, Gary Ridgway was arrested. The news sent shockwaves through the community. The monster they had feared for so long was not a mythical figure, but a man they might have passed on the street. The arrest, however, was just the beginning of the final chapter. To avoid the death penalty, Ridgway agreed to a plea bargain. The terms were staggering. He would cooperate fully with investigators and lead them to the remains of his undiscovered victims. What followed was a grim and surreal process. Ridgway, devoid of any visible remorse, calmly guided detectives to remote, wooded areas, pointing out the final resting places of the young women he had taken. His cooperation brought a painful, long-awaited closure to some families, allowing them to finally lay their loved ones to rest. He confessed to an astonishing number of murders, far more than investigators had originally attributed to the Green River Killer. In 2003, Gary Ridgway pleaded guilty to 48 counts of aggravated murder. Though he claimed to have killed many more, possibly over 70. During his sentencing, the courtroom was filled with the raw, heart-wrenching pain of the victims' families. One by one, they stood up and confronted the man who had stolen their daughters, sisters, and friends. They spoke of the bright lives cut short and the decades of grief they had endured. Their words were a powerful testament to the enduring human spirit in the face of unimaginable loss. The story of Gary Ridgway serves as a dark reminder of the evil that can exist behind a mask of normalcy. But it is also a story of incredible persistence and dedication. It's a tribute to the law enforcement officers who never gave up, the scientists who developed the tools to uncover the truth, and most importantly, the families who never stopped fighting for justice for their loved ones. Their resilience ensures that the victims of the Green River Killer will never be forgotten. This case changed forensic investigation forever, highlighting the profound impact of DNA evidence in solving cold cases. It underscores the importance of preserving evidence, even when a case seems hopeless, because scientific advancements can provide answers years or even decades later. It's a story of darkness, but also of the unwavering pursuit of light. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into historical events. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.